Gary Lineker has hit out at the BBC over their censorship of the film Gaza Medics Under Fire. He spoke at a screening of the film after it had been acquired by Channel 4.
One of the most important films I've ever seen, certainly most moving. Might need a minute here. It needed to be seen. It really did need to be seen. I think everyone will agree with that. I think the BBC should hold its head in shame. The truth is, at the moment, at the very top of the BBC, not the BBC all, because there are thousands and thousands of people, as you know, that work at the BBC that are good people, that understand what is going on here and can see it. We're seeing it on our phones every day. And the problem is they're bowing to the pressure from the top.
So on the far left of that image, you could see Ben de Peer. So he's the former editor of Channel 4 News and was the executive producer of the Gaza Medics documentary. He's also been scathing about the BBC this week. He wrote a post on LinkedIn saying this. Channel 4's team are purely about those two pillars of broadcast journalism, balance and accuracy. The BBC currently have a third, politics, and they comply from that first and foremost, and it is ruining them. And he went on to say this, we will tell the full story of the painful journey around this film elsewhere. Firstly, because we want to ask why it is so difficult to make documentaries about the biggest and worst assault on civilians this century. This should not be so. Why should there only be a handful of UK documentaries about Gaza? Why won't US media commission anything? Why can we watch on our phones the deaths of tens of thousands, but not on our TVs? And then he says, secondly, and because we are free to do so, because I rejected and refused to sign the double gagging clause the BBC bosses tried multiple times to get me to sign. Not only could we have been sued for saying the BBC refused to air the film, palpably and provably true, but also if any other company had said it, the BBC could sue us. Not only could we not tell the truth that was already stated, but neither could others. Reader, I didn't sign it, and I spoke the truth at Sheffield, and I felt better. If you work at the BBC, you should try it if you can. And I think this sort of really gets at what was, most outrageous about the BBC's behaviour here, because not only did they not show this film, but this film was available to be shown months ago, and the BBC, sat on it because Ben de Peer and the producers couldn't give this to Channel 4 News or Zateo as they have until it was, given up by the BBC. And then the BBC also trying to gag Ben de Peer so he can't say anything about the process, which is just really, really disgraceful behaviour. The film Medics Under Fire is now streaming via Zateo and Channel 4. This is the trailer for that film.
A group of Palestinian emergency workers and medics are on a rescue mission. Their ambulances clearly marked with lights flashing. Israeli soldiers open fire and start to kill the rescue workers. They said the convoy was suspicious because its lights were off. But when 15 bodies were exhumed from a mass grave, this video from the phone of one of the dead medics exposed the Israeli version of events as untrue. This is just one attack amongst hundreds on Palestinian healthcare workers.
يما سامحيني يما هذه هي الطريقة اللي اخترتها يما إني أساعد الناس سامحيني يما والله ما قبلت هذا الطريق ده لأساعد الناس.
To discuss the controversy surrounding the film and the plight of medics in Gaza, I spoke earlier to Dr. Omar Abdelmanan. He's a British-Egyptian paediatric neurologist based in London who since 2011 has participated in numerous medical missions to Gaza. I started by asking him how important he thinks it is that this film is now being shown.
Yeah, so, we've been watching a live stream genocide on our TV screens and a systematic destruction and targeting of the healthcare system and healthcare workers in Gaza since October 23. And this is honestly the first time that I've seen this level of in-depth research and this level of in-depth footage of what's happening in Gaza on mainstream TV. It's actually mind-boggling to think that it's taken 2 years for a full feature-length film to be made about essentially the most vile and targeted attacks on healthcare in any modern conflict whatsoever. I think sadly, having on the BBC would have been a powerful statement. I think whether it was in terms of reach or in terms of actually going against the bias that we've been seeing from the BBC, and it's really, it's a shame on the BBC for continuing in their anti-Palestinian bias that we've seen since day one.
And on the night the film was shown, Israel assassinated one of Gaza's most senior doctors. So he's a man called Dr. Marwan Sultan. He was the director of the Indonesian hospital until he was killed by an Israeli airstrike on his home in Gaza City, along with several family members. His children have said the strike was clearly targeted at the room their father was in, so the killing must have been intentional. And I suppose what this reminds me of is the way that, so especially sort of in Lebanon and Iran, Israel sort of expertly targeted the command structures of militaries, states, organizations, and sort of took out the leading figures in the hope that would make the organization collapse. So we saw this with Hezbollah and then the Iranian state to some degree, at least certainly the Iranian military. Do you think that in Gaza, they're kind of doing a similar thing when it comes to the medical establishment? They're trying to take out the command structure of hospitals so that the medical system breaks down?
Absolutely. I think there is no question that this is a targeted extermination, decapitation of the top brass of Gazan healthcare leaders. In the last 50 days, we've lost over 70 healthcare workers. Since October 2023, almost 1,600 health workers in Gaza have been killed by Israel, according to the Gazan Ministry of Health. And if this had happened in the UK, we'd be talking about an equivalent of 50,000 healthcare workers in the NHS that have been killed or have been wiped out of the NHS. Now, imagine if that happened here, what sort of load that would bear on our healthcare system. So, and I was just looking at a picture the other day of health workers in Gaza, and there's a picture of Dr. Adnan Al-Burj, the head of the orthopedic hospital, standing next to Dr. Omar Farwana, the Dean of the Islamic University of Gaza, and Dr. Marwan Sultana, who's the director of the Indonesian hospital, all next to each other, and they've all been killed. And, these are the key leaders of healthcare within Gaza. So I think there is no question that Israel's targeting them with an idea of destroying a healthcare system that is there to sustain life. And when you destroy a healthcare system that is sustaining life, then you start entering territory where there are preventable deaths on a large scale, the forced starvation, the malnutrition, the infectious diseases, and the civilian death figures that we see, even by the Ministry of Health, are probably underestimated. The Lancet has shown that through epidemiological studies that the numbers are significantly higher. So we are entering extremely dangerous territory where there is a risk of mass death within Gaza, not only by the systematic targeting and bombing campaign by Israel, but also secondary effects of having almost no healthcare facilities available to protect life and to sustain life.
And could you tell me about your organization? So you founded Healthcare Workers for Palestine. What does that do? How are you sort of organizing to support medics in Gaza?
So Health Workers for Palestine started in November 2023. Actually, ironically, as a result of censorship, we were planning to hold a fundraiser for Gaza at the Royal College of Physicians, which was cancelled 2 days before the event for security reasons, quote unquote. And we decided to hold a vigil outside 10 Downing Street with our key speakers, many international leading figures within the medical field, many of them Palestinian. So it became a solidarity movement that spread across 30 UK towns and cities and 70 cities globally, where we were holding simultaneous weekly vigils in solidarity with our colleagues. Since then, we've realized that there is a lot of work to be done outside of purely protesting and holding vigils. So we've been lobbying Parliament, lobbying our healthcare institutions, healthcare leadership consistently. One recent win, which your audience is probably aware of, was at the British Medical Association annual representative meetings council. So we had a number of pro-Palestinian BMA members, doctors who have voted in, and they passed 4 motions within the BMA that, according to the structure of the BMA, they now have to enact, which are all anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian motions to push back against the censorship that we're seeing within our medical institutions. We're also working with legal partners to fight back the censorship, the referrals of doctors and healthcare workers for fitness to practice tribunals for simply speaking out on social media against genocide. This is something that has been done in a very systematic way by the Zionist lobbies in the UK, and we're fighting that against that as well. And on top of that, one key element is we founded a fundraising arm, which is the Health Workers for Palestine Solidarity Fund. So that was co-designed with health workers on the ground in Gaza and Dr. Hassan Abu Sitta and other leading pioneering healthcare leaders to basically work on Palestinian-led rebuilding of healthcare. Because we've seen with international NGOs, they're doing excellent work, but at the same time, many of them are often stealing some of the local staff through inflated salaries, people who should be working, in the government hospitals. And at times, the humanitarianism that is being done is not in the most ethical way. So what we believe in is a Palestinian-led rebuilding of the healthcare system, training of local specialists, many of whom I mentioned who have been killed, meaning years of experience have gone. So that's one primary focus which we are doing at the moment.
That was Omar Abdelmanan, founder of Healthcare Workers for Palestine. And that group are actually organising a really impressive-looking event coming up in London. So the event, called Voices of Solidarity, will take place on the 19th of July at the Troxy. It will include performances from Bassem Youssef. Bassem Youssef, absolutely huge. It's a really good get for them. And Paloma Faith, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, Nish Kumar, Rosie Jones, Alexi Sale, and lots more sort of comedians, musicians. The event aims to raise £1 million for Gaza's health workers and their families. And we'll put a link to that event in the description box below.